watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar.
My name is Ayush Alavadi. Let's have a look at today's headlines. The UIDAI moves to address privacy concerns, introduces virtual ID to avoid the need for sharing your Aadhaar number at the time of authentication, and a limited KYC feature that will eliminate the need to store Aadhaar numbers by agencies.
The cabinet paves the way for Air India stake sale, gives its nod for 49% FDI in the debt-ridden state carrier via the approval route.
The cabinet allows 100% foreign direct investment in single-brand retail via the automatic route.
The race for Bhushan Steel heats up. Bloomberg Quint learns that Tata Steel, ArcelorMittal, Vedanta Group Sale and JSW Steel are firming up bids.
And also on the show this evening, in the run-up to the budget, we put the spotlight on the rural sector. Former member of the Planning Commission Abhijit Sen and ITC's Agriculture Division Head S. Sivakumar share their views on what needs to be done to reduce stress in the sector. We'll also get to Nilesh Shah of Kota KMC on his budget expectations.
Well, let's get to the top story this evening. In a bid to address privacy concerns raised against the Aadhaar program, the UIDAI today introduced two new layers of security to the biometric database. The first one is the introduction of a virtual ID, and the second is the limited KYC. Nishant Sharma tells us all about the new schemes in this report.
As per the circular issued by the Unique Identification Authority of India, a virtual ID now can be used against the original Aadhaar number at the time of authentication for availing various services and welfare scheme. Now, virtual ID is nothing but a temporary revocable 16-digit number mapped to your Aadhaar number. A citizen has to generate its own VID. Once a VID is generated, a token will also be issued, which will be stored by the system to double check the credentials of the VID. Now, a user can generate multiple VIDs, but once you generate a new one, it will cancel out the previous VIDs. You can also set a validity of your VID. Post that, you have to again generate a new VID. Now, UID in its circular also said that it will limit the number of agencies that will have access to your Aadhaar data and biometric IDs. And for that, it has set two categories. One is local and one is global. While the global authentication agencies will be able to access and store your Aadhaar number and data, local agencies will be allowed to only store your virtual IDs, and to double check your virtual IDs, they will use the token that was generated at the time of issuing the VID to double check the credentials of the person who was given the VID.
All right, so Nishant was telling you essentially what these changes are all about. But what is this VID? How does it make your life and my life a little simpler? Well, what we've done at Bloomberg Quint is we've tried to, well, simulate what this might be like, and I'll also take you through what the user experience, the UX, will be like. Well, essentially, we're going to show you what a random generation is. What is a VID? A VID is a 16-digit, PIN or code. Why is it different? It's generated for every transaction, right? The first transaction, if you went to any retailer or to an authentication agency, you would essentially just go with your Aadhaar number, a 16-digit number, and you would, well, give that to them, right? Now it changes. What the VID does is that it generates a new one for every transaction. The problem here is that you will actually need to generate this. For example, if this was the UIDAI portal, you will be given this option as a user of Aadhaar. You will have to go either to the Aadhaar UIDAI portal online, or you'll have to go to, well, the M-Aadhaar application, or you can go to the enrollment center where this technology is available. But this will happen over some time. I'll tell you what the timeline is, but this is what a generator is. Have you ever used LastPass as a password generator, or have you used a key generator when you're trying to use some of those virtual drives at home, cracking some of those games? Well, this is similar to what it's like. You will go on it. If this was your Aadhaar number per se, well, this is a fictional number. You hit generate, and what this essentially does is it would generate a new number for that transaction. Let's say that number is X, right? That will work for that particular transaction. When you go out perhaps to, well, get a new SIM, or when you go out perhaps to flash that number for identification, it will work for that particular transaction. You can change it, and the minute you change it, the earlier one is extinct, right? Now, these essentially will be issued starting March 1st. What does this mean? It means that the tools, the application, the infrastructure will be ready by March 1st for everyone to start using, but it doesn't become mandatory. What it essentially happens is on June 1st, everyone in the system will be allowed to do this. It never becomes mandatory per se. So you can continue using, well, your UID or your Aadhaar number, which if you were worried about, you still might be concerned about it, right? But this is, well, another layer of security when you're talking about the onion. This is just one layer of security that they've added, and it's a very welcome step. Let's see what people are talking about, right? So you have Mohandas Pai, and he says that we all understand the risk, but there's no greater risk than anywhere else. Even RBI is under the same risk. The UIDA has responded by saying how it is going to reduce the risk and how it's going to enhance security and protect our privacy. Well, you know, as a proponent of Aadhaar, that seems to be, well, a legit view. But if we move on to what Pranesh Prakash actually told me, he actually said that he requests the UIDA, and it's a crucial point, to make the virtual ID, which they're coming up with, mandatory rather than optional, and to actually generate VIDs for people to generate these VIDs themselves. It's a welcome start, but a lot more needs to be done. That might be an issue because, well, if you're in a remote village or anywhere where you don't have access to that technology or that bandwidth, you'll actually have to go and do this yourself. Maybe the UIDA can help us with it. Maybe the enrollment centers will play that part. But remember, it not being mandatory is a big key concern, because at the end of the day, what we are using right now is our Aadhaar number, which is that unique code which is linked to practically everything, right? There are obviously, like Nishant mentioned, there are global and local when they've split it up now, which is interesting because there's global AUAs and local AUAs. They'll be different because the global AUAs will have access to the full eKYC with the Aadhaar number. The local AUAs, which are not categorized as global AUAs, by the UIDA. The UIDA will decide what is global and what is local. Global AUA status quo, what everyone has access to right now, which is your eKYC data. For other authentication agencies, there will be a new class created called local AUAs. It's not that complicated. It is a step in the right direction when it comes to privacy and security.
Well, Ayush, thanks for that explainer. And, you know, this is the question a lot of people want to know, that how do I generate my virtual ID? So that was a practical explanation. But let's come to the debate, which is at the kernel of the entire Aadhaar story. Is this enough? Because there is a huge section of people who have said and raised concerns about privacy when it comes to Aadhaar. Do these changes assuage those concerns? Is this new version safer? We're talking about that on Primetime Debate. Up next, Pawan Duggal and Nikhil Kumar will be joining me and giving their views on this new safety mechanism inherent now in Aadhaar. Now, the Cabinet has approved a 100% FDI in single brand retail through the automatic route. This is a change from the earlier threshold of 49%, above which foreign retailers required government permissions. India still hasn't allowed FDI in multi-brand retail, though. Shares of retailers soared after the government's announcement. The government has also tweaked the local sourcing norms. Companies will now be allowed to meet the mandatory 30% local sourcing norm incrementally within a period of 5 years of opening their first store in India.
So who stands to gain and who stands to lose after the decision to allow 100% FDI in single brand retail? Charlene D'Souza joins us now. Charlene, what are retailers saying?
100% foreign direct investment in single brand retail is a definite positive for multinational players which are already present in the country. According to Pinaki Ranjan Mishra, who's partner at EY India, as the sourcing norms have been relaxed. However, foreign retailers which are looking to enter the country will have to comply with the sourcing norms before setting foot here. So clearly, Apple will have to source from India when it thinks about coming into the country. Now, Sanjay Jain, Executive Director at Monte Carlo Fashion, said that I do not see much fresh investments coming into India because of this, since most large brands have already come through the approval route. The only difference is that they can now open their own stores when earlier they needed a partner with local brands. Now, V-Mart, on the other hand, earlier told Bloomberg Quint that 100% FDI and single brand retail will definitely benefit the economy, the retail sector and the consumer, as it is a great opportunity for foreign investors to expand in the Indian market. However, the traders' body isn't quite happy with this move by the government. Kite said in a statement that it is a serious matter for small businesses. It is a pity that instead of formulating policies for the welfare, upgradation and modernization of existing retail trade, the government is more interested in paving ways for MNCs to enter the country.
Well, thanks for that, Charlene. But let's cut across now to Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, Rajiv Kumar, who is speaking after the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council meet.
Our experts came from all over the country, and and that was actually something that the Prime Minister had wanted, and so there was a regional representation, there was sectoral representation, and there was always also very candid discussions across sectors.
Three big ideas.
Or
you can say six.
No, not. You see, the point is that it's very difficult at this time to give you those three big ideas or six or whatever, because see the line between what is relevant for the budget and not is very blurred.
Right.
So I would actually be breaching the rule that I had set myself, which is that this was a Chatham House discussion and it was a closed door. So let me not get into those. Let me just sort of let it suffice for me to say that the ideas ranged from the entire spectrum of the economy. But one thing that I could a couple of things that I could say is that what came out very clearly today was one that the Prime Minister's call for doubling of farmers' income is not just a pie in the sky. Several speakers said that we must shift our focus from increasing agricultural production, which actually leads to whether the production falls or increases, the agricultural income, farmers' income may or may not increase. So when the production goes up, prices goes down, farmer still remains the same. So many experts said that we should shift from a focus on increasing agricultural production to raising farmers' income, which can come about by improving productivity, by lowering costs, by having greater efficiency, by giving much greater market access to the farmers, making them producers of products rather than commodities, and creating somebody, for example, suggested that you create clusters in different districts, which can specialize in some agricultural product, so that you have the backward and forward linkage, etc. So I think that was one very big idea. The second big idea that I can sort of say without any breach of budget confidentiality is that I think there was a unanimous support for the National Medical Commission, the NMC bill. And some people have called it historical. They congratulated the Prime Minister on taking it forward and approving it. They said they know the difficulty that there is in getting this approved, but there was a very strong support for the NMC bill.
From the healthcare experts as well.
From the healthcare experts, from the doctors themselves, and there were some doctors. There you go. So you see that. So that's the second thing that I could say. The third important thing was that the statistics that you're getting on lack of employment generation are probably overstated, and here I can actually, in some sense, give you breaking news, which is that we in Niti Aayog have set up a small task force, had set up a task force with leading experts, professors from IIMs and otherwise, to examine what we call high-frequency employment data, which comes out of EPFO and ESIC and professional bodies, etc. They've done a very large exercise of what is known normally as big data analytics, and that has come out with some numbers which will come back with you, and which are in some sense startling and quite in contrast to what the Labour Bureau numbers have been or what the CMIE numbers have been. And you will see that there is much better news on employment than what people have thought about, and yet number of experts, and I think all of us agreed, did maintain that employment was the key going forward. And then some people pointed out that the fact has that the educated unemployment among the young of this country may be as high as 20% or more. And that's now creating problems. And as you train more people, as you skill more people, as you educate more people, you actually raise their aspirations and therefore create a situation where where aspirations are rising, and if you're not able to provide them with the jobs. So jobs, in fact, somebody said very clearly that it's time now to target only jobs and jobs growth, and may not be growth, but that high rates of growth are important for generating jobs apart from other things. And then finally, I think there is one other very big idea, which was that can India shift? Can India adopt, not shift? Can India adopt a stronger export-driven growth strategy? Given that the global economy is now in a phase of synchronized expansion, so therefore there's a big opportunity here for India to try and get that, and for that we need better government capability to target the sectors and the skills, etc., which are needed to expand these exports. That's what we should be doing.
So there was
and just one final thing, which is that I'm very pleased to say that the Prime Minister himself has asked us now to continue working on each of these individual sectors, and that maybe within the next 2 months after the budget, we will have other such sessions, more detailed, more sector specific, and come up with new ideas in each of these sectors that we discussed.
So there was a consensus amongst economists that going forward there should be a long-term capital gain tax. So how do you see that being taken forward by the government?
That is one.
But again, that's something which is budget related. So I would rather refrain from commenting on it. So you would appreciate that.
Just adding one more question. So one question. One question here, sir. One question.
एक मिनट हाँ जी
लॉन्ग टर्म कैपिटल गेन टैक्स की बात हो रही है, इसका व्यू क्या था इकोनॉमिस्ट का, क्या क्या उन्होंने कहा?
जैसा कि अमूमन होता है कि एक कमरे में 3 अर्थशास्त्री बैठाइए तो उसमें 4 व्यूज होते हैं, तो उसी किस्म का इसमें भी है। मगर तो इसलिए मैं इस पर और टिप्पणी से ज़्यादा नहीं कर सकता, क्योंकि ये सीधा बजट से रिलेटेड इशू है, इसलिए मैं ये भी मैं नहीं कह सकता। मैं ये भी नहीं कह सकता। देखिए मैं आपको साफ साफ कह दूं कि मैं बजट से लगे हुए किसी भी प्रश्न का अगर जवाब दूंगा भी तो फिर आपसे कह दूंगा मैंने नहीं दिया, इसलिए मुझसे ना पूछें तो अच्छा है।
Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, Rajiv Kumar, there speaking after the meeting of the Prime Minister with his Economic Advisory Council. Of course, he stopped short of giving too many details of what has been discussed in the context of the budget. Now, the Cabinet has also approved 49% FDI in the national carrier Air India. That was the other big story today. This is in line with the government's stated objective of selling part of its stake in the debt-laden airline. The new FDI rules will also ensure that effective control of the airline remains with an Indian entity. The government has been looking for bids, but the airline's debt pile is a big deterrent for investors. Its total outstanding debt stood at over 48,000 crore rupees at the end of March 2017. The airline is expected to report a net loss of nearly 3,600 crore rupees in the current financial year. And interestingly, this move to allow FDI in Air India comes just days after a parliamentary panel report has, as per news agency PTI, recommended that the Maharaja should not be sold. So can the Maharaja be sold in the current circumstances? Is it attractive enough? We'll talk about that up ahead on Primetime Debate. Jitendra Bhargav, Mohammad Khan and Ejaz Ilmi are going to be joining me on the debate. Well, so there has been a move for foreign direct investment and opening it up today by the government on various counts, retail, and we told you about Air India as well. What is the big picture? To talk about it, I have with me Goldie Dhama, Partner Tax and Regulatory, PwC India. Welcome, Mr. Dhama, to Primetime. I just want to get a sense from you of whether there is anything substantial coming out of what the government has announced today, because there are some comments from industry experts in retail saying that the big brands are already here through the earlier route. How much of an impetus will this give in retail and aviation?
Right. So good evening. So on a general perspective, the decision taken by the government is more sort of clarificatory in nature and sort of puts into place some of the issues which companies are facing. From a retail perspective, there are two large changes. One, obviously, bringing the sector under the automatic route, And secondly, there's a change in the sourcing condition, which basically now allows any global or any incremental global sourcing to be counted towards the 30% sourcing commitment. If you take both of them into account, this should certainly ease and help foreign brand owners to look at India more favorably and sort of put their money into the country.
Right. Mr. Dhamma, just as a follow-up to that, the latter bit that you were talking about being the local sourcing change. Now, that's interesting because I know a lot of tech companies around the world have been watching that very anxiously, especially Apple. I think that's been a stumbling block for them for the longest time to set up Apple stores in India. Now, it could be interesting considering it would allow companies like them to start retail outlets or Apple stores and then ramp up production. Do you think this would be an impetus at least for those kind of companies?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It will be an impetus for everyone, including the tech companies, because there are a lot of companies internationally which source already from India, and the ask of these companies to the government was that allow our existing sourcing, or at least the incremental sourcing, to be counted towards the 30% sourcing commitment. Now, by doing that, it is sort of allowed and sort of agreed to the ask of the companies, and hopefully this will tantamount now to these companies putting in money and sort of setting up stores in India.
Just coming back to the targets that the government has for divestment. The target, of course, is 46,500 crore rupees. The achievement has already been over 32,000 crore rupees. How much do you think will today's moves help, and how much more is needed?
I think if you look at what has happened in the last, a couple of years, the government has time and again liberalized the policy. And today, if you look at the policy, it's quite a liberal policy across sectors, with only a very few sectors under the government approval route or where there are conditions. So time and again, government is going towards, amending the policy, and it's in line with its principle of ease of doing business. So if you put all of this together, then clearly this will help in sort of achieving the target of the number which you mentioned.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Dhamma, for joining us this evening on Primetime. And debt-ridden steel companies are attracting a lot of interest, and not just from domestic players. The latest example being Bhushan Steel. It turns out that strategic investors have submitted resolution plans for the steel maker. Vishwanath sums up the development in this report.
5 bidders, that includes Tata Steel, SAIL, ArcelorMittal, JSW Steel, and one more player, who are all looking at trying to buy Bhushan Steel and at least submit a resolution plan by the 18th of January. That is the deadline that the resolution professional in the case has set. Now this is in continuation with what has happened with Electro Steel. So yesterday, Electro Steels had put out a notification on the stock exchanges saying that 4 bidders have submitted their resolution plans already to the resolution professional. The lenders are in the process of assessing these plans and seeing which one fits best. If you look at what is up with Bhushan Steel, it's about a 55,000 crore debt case, while Electro Steel is about 13,000 crore. Both these are large stressed steel companies. So whatever happens in these companies, however these resolution plans come into play and what are the kind of haircuts that the lenders will be taking, all of these things will sort of determine or set the pace for how the other stressed companies within the RBI's list of stress companies, how they are resolved, and what are the kind of haircuts that the lenders would have to take there, and thereby looking at getting out of this sort of NPA mess that we are in currently.
Well, Bloomberg sources say that India's third largest state-run lender, Bank of Baroda, is seeking to sell Nainital Bank. The move is done to shed non-core assets in a bid to bolster the bank's balance sheet. The size of the stake sale will depend on approvals from the central bank. Bank of Baroda holds 98.6% stake in Nainital Bank, which had assets of about 77 billion rupees as of March 31st, 2017. Nainital Bank is spread across 5 states and reported a net income of 48.4 crore rupees in year ending March 31st. Its bad loan ratio stood at 5% of the total. Bank of Baroda's spokesman has declined to comment on market speculation.
Now, the government has successfully divested 2.52% of paid-up capital in state-owned miner NMDC for approximately 1,200 crore rupees. The stake sale saw a robust response, with the retail portion getting oversubscribed 5.4 times. Over 8.58 crore bids came in for 1.59 crore shares in day one of the two-day offer for sale. Finance Ministry has tweeted about 980 crores have come from non-retail investors and 232 crore rupees from retail investors. The government had originally planned to sell 1.5% stake in the company with a green shoe option to retail an equal quantum. Based on the response from institutional buyers, the government decided to keep the issue size at 2.52% to encourage retail participation. Now, a discount of 5% on the cutoff price was also offered to retail investors. The retail portion has been oversubscribed by 439%. The issue has attracted investments from foreign investors, domestic institutional investors, and mutual funds. With this transaction, the Government of India's shareholding in NMDC has come down from 74.94 to 72.42.
Well, in other news, there's another exodus. At Religare Enterprises, Bloomberg Quint learns that the executive chairman and independent director have stepped down. The resignations come after the RBI raised questions about some borrowers of its non-bank lending arm, Religare FinWest. Ridhima Saxena filed this report on the management flux at Religare.
It seems to be the impact of RBI's letter inquiring into the corporate loan book of its of Religare's lending arm, Religare FinWest, that has led to a slew of resignations coming from the management. Barely 2 months into their jobs, S. Lakshmi Narayanan, who was the executive chairman, and Kishori Udeshi, who was working as the independent director, have already put in their papers. We gather from our sources that these resignations have not yet been announced on exchanges because they are still awaiting RBI's approval. The company, however, has not confirmed that any of these resignations have been made by the management. We also understand from an earlier round of resignations that from after the first letter from RBI in September, Sunil Godwani, who was the CEO and whole-time director at the company, had resigned. Soon after, in November, the CFO, company secretary, and 2 independent directors had also put in their papers. This is after November that the new executive chairman and the independent director and some other members of the management were inducted into the company.
Well, Tamanna, it's been a very eventful day today. I'm guessing those big events are going to be covered on Primetime Debate.
Eventful Primetime Debate for sure. First up, we're talking about the Maharaja. Air India, 49% can be sold to foreign investors now as of today. That's the new norm. But who's willing to buy is the question. Coming at a time when a parliamentary panel says don't sell at least till 2022. We're going to go over those details first up on Primetime Debate. And then the big one. We've been covering UIDAI's Aadhaar pretty much all through the week here, Ayush. And today the question is, this new version with 2 steps more of security, is it finally going to be enough for those who are raising questions? Will the Aadhaar activists and all of those who are worried about privacy...
Does it actually quell those concerns?
Yeah, are they going to say, now, all right, this version works fine. We're coming back with those stories right after this very, very, very quick break. Don't go away.